First part of our agenda is a special meeting. We have a special presentation tonight from Becky Veazey of the MAPS Group. The MAPS Group has been helping us with a position classification study and also compensation study, and also taking a look at our personnel policy. Ms. Veazey?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr.
Come
Mayor.
forward and make yourself at home. Thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity to be here. As some of you, I think I met 5 or 6 years ago now when we did this study. This is an update of the study. For those of you I didn't, I always start by telling folks when I introduce myself, I'm a Cowgirl, which means born in North Carolina, educated in Chapel Hill, one of those true blue folks, and the women are playing right now. But those of you who want to, I'm a custom degree too. I have both an undergraduate and a master's in public administration. When I left there, I went to work with the city of Greensboro and their HR department. Then went back to Chapel Hill, worked for the town of Chapel Hill and their HR department for 3 years. Then went to Cary. And you see my white hair. I was Cary's first ever HR director. Went there in 1981 when the town had a population of 26,000 folks and 175 employees. I was there for 7 years, and during that time I went from 26 to 45,000 population, from 175 to 400 employees. Left Cary to be the HR director in Durham County, and for the last 35 years I've been working with MAPS. MAPS stands for Management and Personnel Services. And we have worked with local governments all over the state, and I've been doing that for the last 35 years. I think it's there a PowerPoint or something? Okay. So what I'd like to do is walk you through just some information about the process and methodology of the study, pass the study out, walk you through it, answer any questions along the way. During the PowerPoint, as I walk you through the study, leave it with you, and if you need me to come back and answer additional questions, I'll be happy to do that. Thank you. So you can see, and that's kind of in the way, I apologize for that. You can see some of our services, and the first two are what we're doing with you, updating your classification pay study, updating your personnel policies. We also do other kinds of services. There we go. Okay. And then hiring processes, a number of other kinds of studies. Those are just examples of some of the places we've worked. Last time I counted, I personally worked with over 225 local governments in North Carolina. And I'm easing into retirement, and I finally, 3 years ago, made it to all 100 counties in North Carolina. So it's really pleased about that. And just some of the nonprofits and other organizations. This contract is performed under the auspices of the North Carolina League of Municipalities. We are their subcontractor. So I want to just walk you through some information about process, methodology, and the first, of course, important piece is why does the town need to have a classification and pay plan and keep it up to date? And you see 5 reasons there. So when we talk about classification and pay, we're really talking about 2 sides of the same coin. The classification side of the coin, the pay side of the coin. Classification side is looking at what are the duties in a job. How do those duties compare to duties in other jobs? Are they very similar? Are they similar enough to have the same title? Or are they different? And if they're different, then ranking those jobs in terms of which require more education, more experience, more knowledge, more skill, more responsibility, which require less. What's an appropriate title for the job? In studies like this, sometimes we recommend a different title. Sometimes, because the duties have changed, and that was the case in a few of your jobs this time, the duties have changed enough that a different title made sense. Sometimes titles get old-fashioned, and we recommend something more modern. And then finally, on the classification side of the coin, capturing the essence of each job in something we call a class specification, what people typically refer to as job descriptions.
Could I ask you, what is internal equity? I mean, I get equal pay for equal work. How is that different from?
When we are ranking jobs, we rank them within occupational groups. We also look within departments and across departments. So for example, you would not want to have a situation where you have an administrative assistant in Department A, an administrative assistant in Department B.
Okay,
The one in Department A has a more difficult job, the one in Department B is in a high pay range.
okay, that makes sense, thank you.
Creating that equity, both horizontally and vertically
Okay.
within the organization. On the recruit side there, on the classification side, those class specifications or job descriptions, as we update those, we really work hard to put in education, experience, knowledge, skills, abilities, and certifications that are needed. So they help when the organization's hiring folks to think about, good ways to ask interview questions and make good matches. Because studies have shown there can be as much as a 40% difference in productivity depending on how good a hiring decision. Of course, that means you've got to have applicants. And that's also the recruit part on the pay side, making sure your starting salary is competitive. And then on the retain side, on classification, because when I was in Chapel Hill, Cary, Durham County, one of my jobs was to do exit interviews, talk to people who were leaving. So I know one of the reasons people do leave is because they don't feel like they're getting credit for the level of responsibility or level of difficulty in their job. And then retain on the pay side there is, again, not just looking at the starting salary, but the actual salaries. Are people advancing within the range at a rate and being paid an actual amount that is competitive based on their seniority and their skills and their knowledge? Equal pay for equal work, of course, is one of the legal pieces of what we do, but it's also our underlying fundamental principle that we base our recommendations on to help you in your organization create that equal pay for equal work. Maximize cost effectiveness. I think the best way to tell you about that one is to tell you about a study I did in 1992. That's a long time ago, over 30 years ago. And this was a city, one of the cities close to Charlotte that was growing. And at the time they had 175 employees and a long-term city manager who'd been there over 40 years. And his philosophy was he didn't want anybody to tell him what he could or couldn't pay. So he didn't have any pay ranges, no starting salaries, no maximums. He wanted to decide, so he'd bring folks in, he'd negotiate, he'd set their pay. He retired, a new manager came in and asked us to do a study for them. When we did that study, 30 however many years ago that was, we found an administrative assistant that was making $52,000 a year. Now, $52,000 a year 30-some years ago is like $82,000 a year now. We found a custodian that was making $45,000, which would be like $75,000 a year now. And then we found a bunch of underpaid folks. So the whole idea behind having a plan, having it accurate and up to date, is having a structure that helps you as elected officials and management make good decisions about where to put resources so the team can hire, keep good people, and be fair. And then two parts of the defensible piece. One is defensible in the legal sense, and there are a number of laws we pay attention to as we do this. The Americans with Disabilities Act, OSHA's Federal Packaging Standards, Fair Labor Standards Act, just to name a few. The other part of defensible is that what we are recommending to you is based on professional methodology. We're not listening to anybody whispering in our ear saying, give so-and-so a raise, don't give so-and-so a raise. We make professional recommendations. So let me pause. Other questions on this slide?
How often should you have this done?
So the rule of thumb has always been about every 5 years,
Okay.
unless the organization is growing rapidly. So in Cary, as you can imagine, what we actually did was put the organization on a 3-year cycle and studied a third of the jobs every year. And studied over, because the more growth and change you have, the more things get out of whack more quickly. But the rule of thumb is about every 5 years for stable organizations. Other questions? There are two things that are going on that create the need to do these updates. One is that jobs change, and we talked a little bit about that. And they can change for any number of reasons. It can be reorganizations, it can be growth. I've done studies, and a good example is the little town of Holly Springs back in About 1990, I did their first study. This is a town in Wake County. They had about 15 employees. I did another one 5 years later. They had about 35 employees. I did another. And so what happens as organizations grow, for example, in Public Works, when I did that first study, they had 3 people who did water, sewer, landscape maintenance, building maintenance, streets, stormwater, the whole business. As they grew, they separated out into public utilities and public works, and then into streets, and and it got more and more specified. So growth changes what people do in jobs. Reorganizations, new technology obviously changes the kind of skills people have to have. So for any number of reasons, what somebody used to do in a job and what they're doing in that job now can be different enough that the job no longer has an accurate job description or potentially an accurate title. So that's the first place we start. The other part, the market, the going rate of pay, everybody knows pay changes over time. And I have to tell you, I've been in local government HR now for over 40 years. And this past 5 years is the hottest market I've ever seen. Salaries have gone up. And I'm sure that I'm not telling you anything like that.
And is that because there's a shortage of people that do these things? I mean, like I told my son he ought to go into some type of government now, town, local government, because I've never seen, it's just hard to find people to do things.
Well, and I hear from my HR colleagues in the private sector, they're having problems too. But I'm not sure they're having as much problem as we are.
Okay, can it also be just the cost of living is skyrocketing?
That is definitely
I mean,
part of it.
I don't care who's in there, it's just part of life.
Absolutely. But skyrocketing more, than, I remember the 70s when we had inflation at 12%. I was in the town of Chapel Hill at that time. But we did not have the problem getting people, that we do now. But the market, does change at different rates for different jobs. So most organizations typically do a cost of living, moving pay up on an average of inflation. But because different jobs change at different rates in the market, what we do is go in and look at individual jobs and then reassign them to the pay plan about every 3 to 5 years. So you readjust those individual job changes. Do the cost of living in between. You don't want to get behind. I've worked with a number of organizations that would skip 1 or 2 or 3 cost of livings. We come back in to do another study 5 years later and they're 15% below market. It's much, even if you can't afford to do as much as the CPI, the more you do, the less hole you dig. So it's really important to try to keep up.
So how do you, like, if you have, like, let's say you're looking at an assistant town manager or something like that, and you look at 40 cities, and you've got those 2 or 3 that are just outliers, they don't pay hardly anything, or on the other side pay way more. How do you figure that out?
So we look at those outliers, we look at scope. So for example, if we're looking at the city of Greenville versus Edenton, I'll pick on the police chief. City of Greenville's gonna have probably 4 times as many staff members and 4 times the budget size. If we look at Livingston, y'all are gonna have more staff and more budget size under a department head. So with supervisory and department head jobs, we don't as much look at average as we look at, okay, it's stronger than this job, it's not as strong as this job, and we do an interpolation. If we're looking just at a police officer, that job is the same, has the same requirements, may not do the same thing every day, but you've got to have the same requirements coming in. And so we do more of just an average.
I think this is fascinating.
So when you leave us and you don't come back for 5 years, do you see any changes throughout the 5 years, or you just don't ever look at it again?
If they call me and ask me
Okay,
to look
we have
at
to call
something,
you.
I will.
Okay.
I'm happy to.
I didn't know if you saw when someone leaves, we replace with so-and-so, and I didn't know how
Yeah,
detailed
no.
it was. Okay. All right.
This is a contract, and we bring you up to date.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm happy to answer phone calls or
Yeah.
anything, but.
No, we don't wanna pay any more than we pay. No.
Well, and I'll answer phone calls for free.
Oh, yeah.
That's not something we're not like billable hours kind of stuff.
Like the lawyers do.
But you are on call if Tammy has a question about a certain
Absolutely.
position in a certain department. Okay, she can.
And she can say, you know, we're looking at establishing a new job with these duties, and we'll send her examples of job descriptions and stuff like that. We're happy to do that. Any other comments or questions on that slide? So the steps in the study, obviously the town identified the need. We started out going through this same information with employees because we believe that transparency is really important, that employees understand what we're doing, how we're doing it, get a chance to ask questions and get them answered. That, you know, we want to give them some sense that things are being done fairly. I've seen organizations spend a lot of money to do this and then have no credibility with employees. So the credibility is really important. Every employee completed a questionnaire with his or her job duties that went through the chain of command for review and sign off. Came to us, we reviewed them. We interviewed at least one person with every different set of job duties. So, you know, if there are 3 police officers on patrol, we interview at least one. You know, we also interview an investigator and a sergeant and so on. Then we go back to the office, we analyze the duties, identify the classifications, gather the salary data, write a narrative summary of what we're recommending, update the personnel policy, send a draft back to the town and say, give us some feedback. Have we misunderstood, misinterpreted anything? Make any tweaks that are needed, which really didn't hardly make any. And then we are tonight presenting it to you. Questions on the process?
I think that's looks like, I mean, just an astoundingly good process.
How many people
Thank
would
you.
you have working here in our town? 2 people. And how long did it take?
About 2.5 months, 3 months, somewhere in there. Trying to remember, we started before Christmas, didn't we? Yeah.
Somebody here every day of the workday, or just sort of?
No. We come in and we do the orientations, and then the town works on the questionnaires. We make, get those together, they send those to us and we review them, then we come down and do interviews. When we finish the interviews, we go back to the office, and this is the first time I've done that since the interviews. Any other questions on that one? So I want to talk a little bit about methodology. First of all, some of the terms I'm using. The difference between a position and a classification. And I'll just pick on the fire chief this time. There might be 3 positions in the classification of fire engineer. There's only 1 position in the classification of fire chief. So you have multi-position classifications, you have single-position classifications. The only time we put multiple positions in the same classification is when all the jobs are similar enough that any one applicant with a given step has the knowledge, skills, and abilities to do any of the jobs. If a job requires a substantially different knowledge, skill, or ability, it goes in a different classification. But the class specification, as I said earlier, similar to a job description. The difference is a job description describes a single position. So essentially the questionnaires the employees did are their job description. We take those and turn them into the class specification, which is a little bit broader, a little bit more formalized, and covers all the jobs, all the positions in that classification. So for example, if we're looking at utility maintenance technician, not every single person might be doing exactly the same thing. Some might focus a little bit more on lift stations, some might focus a little bit more on water meters or fixing or replacing meters, for example. But they all work together, and back each other up. So that would be one classification. The most important distinction, that they are very important, is the difference between position and employee. The classification plan is a position classification plan, not an employee classification plan. And what that means is we're studying jobs, not people. We, can study a vacant job, and did in some cases here. If the supervisor does a questionnaire, tells us the duties, we can classify the job. The classification plan should be accurate as employees coming back, because it represents the work that the town has to be done, not the person who happened to be doing that work at the time of the study. Questions about those? Not too far? Okay, okay. These are not, I'm going to go over these because these are some of the things that are most frequently misunderstood about classification. These are not factors that go into determining which jobs are at the same classification level, which are at different classification levels. Now, this is on the classification side of the coin. Some of these come back into play on the pay side of the coin, and I'll talk about that too. But let me start with volume of work and give you an example. And I have to go back to before you replaced all those meters, to your old way of reading meters to give you my example. So let's say hypothetically the town had 3 water meter readers. And let's say hypothetically one of them had, was reading, one of them read on average 600 meters a day. One read on average 500 meters a day, and one read 400 meters a day. Different volumes of work. Now, when we look at those positions to determine do they go in the same classification or different classifications, what we're looking at is are the duties the same or are the duties different? So if all 3 of those meter readers have the duty of reading residential water meters, then the duties are the same, the classification's the same, the salary range is the same. Now, the difference between 400 meters a day and 600 meters a day might be one reading 600 meters a day is more efficient, more productive. That would be performance evaluation and merit or performance pay, a different part of the system. Difference might be the one reading 400 meters a day, it's just reading in a part of town where the houses are spaced out further, the meters do, and it just takes longer, not a classification factor. On the other hand, if one of those meter readers is reading residential water meters, the second one is reading, repairing, replacing, and testing meters. The third one is reading, repairing, replacing, test meters, and operates the backhoe when there's a water line break. Then you've got 3 different sets of duties and 2 different classifications. Questions about that? The last one, length of service. And again, we're looking at the job, not the person. So length of service is not a factor in there. So if there are 3, I can't think of somebody I haven't picked on yet recently, so I'll just go back to 3 police officers. One's been here 6 months, one's been here 5 years, one's been here 15 years. Again, if the duties are the same, the classification's the same, the salary range is the same. And when we get to the pay side of the coin, hopefully we see them at 3 different places in that salary range because of different lengths of service. Employee qualifications gets interesting because in classification what we're looking at is not what are the qualifications the person has, but rather what are the qualifications the job requires. Probably the best example of that goes back to when I was working for the town of Chapel Hill. We were doing a study of our bus drivers, had about 50 bus drivers at the time, and believe it or not, 2 of them were attorneys. They'd finished law school at Carolina, they'd passed the bar, hadn't gotten a job as an attorney yet, so they're still driving buses, which was how they put themselves through law school. So, who thinks you should pay a bus driver with a law degree differently than the other bus drivers?
The 3 of us do.
I've seen all 3 of y'all drive.
I do sometimes get pushback from the attorneys in the room. But I think y'all get the point. And then finally, employee work performance is not part of classification because again, that's the person we're looking at, the job, not the person. As we went through this process, we don't know who's doing a wonderful job, we don't know if somebody's in trouble, has nothing to do with what we're doing. I was doing a study sometime back for a really small town. This was a town with no manager. They had, I think, 9 employees, 1 reported to the Public Works Commissioner, 3 reported to the Public Works Commissioner, 3 to the Police Commissioner, and 3 to the Finance Commissioner. And I passed out the recommendations, which I'll be doing with y'all shortly. And we got to one of the particular pages, and one of the board members just blurted out, "We can't pay this person this much." And I said, said, well, what's the problem? He said, well, he's doing a lousy job, we're getting ready to fire him. And I said, well, you know, if you told him what he needs to do to improve, and you've given him a chance to improve, and he's still not doing his job, you do have to deal with that person appropriately. But you still want to classify the job accurately, put it in a competitive salary range, so if you fire somebody who's doing a bad job, you'll have what you need to get somebody who can do a good job. Sometimes we don't end up with the level of expertise we need because we aren't paying where we need to be. Questions on that one? Okay, these are the factors we do use in determining which jobs are at the same classification level, which are at different levels. And I'm not going to go through every single one of these. Let me just give you a few examples here. Difficulty, how hard are the problems that have to be solved. Complexity, how many steps does somebody have to go through to complete a task? Can they get it done in 3 steps? Does it take them 33 steps? Variety of work, how many different kinds of things do they have to know about or be able to do? I think most of those are pretty self-explanatory. Any questions on any of those? So I'm going to turn back to the pay side of the coin now and talk just a little bit about how what we are doing sort of fits into the overall compensation system for the town. So there are 4 primary components to any compensation system, whether it's public sector or private sector. Each one has a separate purpose. Different organizations combine them in different ways in the way they just structure their system. But those 4 are kind of the bare bones with 4 purposes to be met. So I'm going to walk you through those. The first one is updating the classification of pay plan. You can think of that sort of as the infrastructure or the bones of the HR system. When it gets out of whack, it pulls everything else out of whack. Just making sure that is up to date. The second one is keeping that COLA. Compensation professionals actually call it a market adjustment. Keeping that moving as much as you can so you don't get in a hole. Looking typically at the national rate of inflation, but also the local economy, because the local economy could be stronger or weaker than the national economy. And what this does is it's intended to keep your hiring rates moving a little bit in between studies. Just keep them moving with changing market conditions, hiring and max. If the town did not do that, and your competitors do, then what would happen is over time their hiring rates would be moving up and be higher. If yours are not, then it ends up with, unfortunately, only being able to hire people nobody else wants, which obviously is not where you want to be. And then the other very important piece of this is turnover. Turnover is very expensive. When the town loses an employee, the cost to the town is a minimum of, according to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, 2/3 of that employee's annual salary. And a lot of your jobs, everything from fire, law enforcement, certified utilities folks, electric folks, just to name a few, are in that 100 to 125% of the annual salary cost. So it is much more cost effective to keep folks than to have to go out and get them. The third, I'm sorry, I forgot to pause for questions. Anybody? The third of those 4 is that once you have the pay ranges established, there needs to be some method of moving those employees across the range. There's no one right or wrong way to do this, but probably the most municipalities do it based on performance. They say we've got 2 employees, one's doing a better job and one doing a better job, so you're getting larger increases and you're making more money. And that's been sort of a trend to put more emphasis on pay for performance, less emphasis on automatic kinds of things. And then the 4th one is longevity pay. And longevity says, thank you for sticking with us. We appreciate your loyalty. Typically awarded in a lump sum amount, usually sometime between Thanksgiving and early December, so it kind of doubles as a Christmas bonus. Questions on that one?
With compression, can you give all of us, I think I know what that means, but can you give all of us a definition or example of that?
You are taking me right where I'm going.
Okay.
Thank you. So what I want to do is illustrate that and how all of this kind of comes together. way to set this up so everybody can see it.
That's
So I'm
good.
just gonna put it here,
Okay.
if that's okay. I apologize, folks. Does it show on the camera? So, the way the pay plan is intended to work is that you have pay grades that go down the page like this. And you have a range with a hiring rate, a minimum, a midpoint, and a max. And the way it's intended to work is that the grades going down the page are intended to represent the job. So I'm just going to use again, the police department as an example because I think their rank structure makes it easy to follow. So we'll say hypothetically, grade 11 is a police officer, grade 13 is a corporal, grade 15 is a sergeant. And I'm just going to put some round numbers up here to illustrate. Don't read anything into these. So we'll just say hypothetically, this goes from 50 to 75,000. We'll say this goes from 60 to 90,000. So when we say the grade represents the job, what that means is if I'm a police officer, and all police officers are in grade 11. All sergeants, corporals are in grade 13, and sergeants, and so forth. If I'm as a police officer, if I get to the top of my grade, I can't just go down to the next grade. That represents the maximum in the market for that job. And it's what keeps you from overpaying and having that $52,000/$82,000 administrative assistant. So the only way my grade changes is if my job changes. So let's say, hypothetically, I get promoted to corporal, then I go to grade for corporal. If I'm a corporal and I mess up and I get demoted to police officer, I go back to the grade for police officer. A study like this could say, well, really, based on the market, police officers should be in grade 12, corporals in 14, sergeants in 16. If you approve that, then all move together. The range then, going across this way, is where the person comes in. So let's say hypothetically, the chief is hiring 2 new police officers today. And let's say hypothetically, one of them is coming straight out of basic law enforcement training, no previous experience. The other one is coming from Williamson and has been a police officer for 2 years. And they're both going to be police officers, so they're going in the same grade, but you have a difference in the person's qualifications. So the way this is intended to work is you'd start the one with no previous experience here, the one with previous experience somewhere above that. Then going to that third one up there, that range movement. Once they're on board, there needs to be some method of moving them across the range. If that method's performance, then what that means is that periodically each employee is considered as to whether or how much of an increase he or she has earned. Now, there is a seniority component to merit or performance pay, because the longer somebody's here, the more opportunities they have to earn that increase. The performance component is the better job somebody does, the larger and or more frequent the increases and the faster they move across the range. So that the kind of distribution you hope to see is you hope to see long-term, high-performance employees. Been here a long time doing a really good job in the top parts of the pay plan. You hope to see middle-term high performers and long-term middle performers in the middle parts of the plan. And you hope to see brand new folks and some other folks who do enough to keep their job, but not a whole lot more, in the beginning parts of the pay range. Questions?
Very clear, thank you.
So
You're really
when-
doing a great job of
Thank
laying this
you.
out. This is fantastic.
So when there's a market adjustment or COLA, the whole chart changes. And we provide the town with a linked spreadsheet that allows them to go to one cell, insert the new amount of that cell for the COLA, and then the whole thing will change. And so, let's say hypothetically you do a 2% COLA, this changes by 2%, this changes by 2%. I have to figure, I'm not sure if I'm doing that in my head right or not. This changes by 2%, and this changes by 2%. Now, what y'all asked us to do in the study primarily is this part right here. What is the proper classification for each town job? And what pay range does it go in to be competitive? And so what we do is we create this chart, build it with the new data and classifications and changes. And then we've got to get every employee back onto this chart into the pay grade that goes with their classification. Every employee somewhere on this new chart. And typically, in your case, we provided 3 different implementation strategies, and I'll walk you through those in a minute. For doing that, for each of those strategies, we do a compression analysis. Finally getting there. And what that means is we take all the employees and all the grades and all the jobs, we collapse them together and we do bar charts. How many employees are at the very beginning of their range bar? How many are 5% into their range bar? How many are 10% into their range bar? And if you look at that bar chart and you draw a line across the top of it, what you hope to see is something that looks sort of like a bell-shaped curve. That's the ideal distribution of employees in a long-term stable organization, a bell-shaped curve. Unfortunately, too often, instead of that bell-shaped curve, we see something that looks like a ski slope, and that's what we call compression. What compression means is that most employees, all the big high bars are over here, most employees are compressed against the beginning parts of the pay ranges. And if there's compression, there are 2 associated problems. One is a hiring problem. Because let's say you've got a really good, well-qualified candidate you want to hire. To get them, you need to pay them here, but your on-board folks are back here. You got a problem. Second problem with compression is a morale issue. Because instead of having long-term high performers over here and bringing folks here, they're very close together. And that does create dissatisfaction and unfortunately can lead to that expensive turnover that we were talking about before. Questions?
So you said you give us 3 different scenarios or 3 different looks?
Implementation strategies.
Okay.
So all of them put police officers in the pay grade that has a competitive starting salary. But
Oh, I got
the
you.
question is how far into that pay grade are we putting them? So the more expensive, the less compression. And I'll show you that a little bit more. Other questions? Pass these out. Start some going in that button. How many are we missing?
Just one.
Just one?
This was one.
Okay, so I'm just gonna, again, kind of walk you through this. Please, stop me and ask questions. So you have a cover page, and that has my contact information if you have questions. Cover letter, and then a cover page, and then a table of contents. Behind the table of contents are organizational organization charts, there's 3 pages of them. Those represent, as we understand it, current reporting relationships and recommended titles. So if we recommended a title change, it's on here. If you go on over to the first tab that says report, from pages 4 through page 16 is a department by department sort of thumbnail sketch of every different classification. So in each of those will give you examples of sort of synopsis of most important duties. If we recommended a title change, if the job is stronger or different from the market, we'll say that too. And just, kind of gives you a thumbnail of our thinking and what we recommend. Turn on over to page 18. And at the top there, you'll see who we survey. And those percentages you see, like 50% is looking at how wide the range is. So if you look at a range that goes to from 50 to 75,000, 75 minus 50 is 25, 25 is half of 50. That's a 50% range. And you'll see that's what we recommended. There are some places in the market that's already creeping up, so we always are monitoring that. But we're still recommending a 50% at this point. Then let me walk you through those 3 options. So options, they start at the bottom of page 18, and you'll see there's different costs associated with each one. So what we did with option 1, and option 1, it comes pretty close to putting people where they really, pretty close to where they should be. And so we take everybody to minimum probation completion, plus 1.5% per year of service. And that, the other part of that is that's a blended year. And what we mean by blended is, let's say you've got a sergeant who's been with the town for 20 years. But they haven't been a sergeant all 20 years. So it doesn't make sense to put them in the range of a sergeant based on 20 years. So we take the amount of time they were a sergeant, the amount of time they've been with the town totally, add them together and divide them in half. We want to give them credit for having been with the town longer, but they haven't been a sergeant the whole time. So that's what we mean by blended. So that is conservative because it would take somebody would have to be here for 33 years to be placed at the top if they have not been promoted. Right? So that, even though in terms of some of the percentages I've seen lately, y'all really are in better shape. So if you can afford that top one, that will get you where you need to be. The option 2 does the same thing, except instead of 1.5%, it's 1%. And then option 3 is at 0.5% per year service. And of course, that third one, it would take 90 years. Somebody would have to be here 90 years to be at the top of the range. So you can see that's. And so if you can't do option 1, if you do option 2 or option 3, think of that as sort of a phase in, and then try to move, maybe in your next budget or 2 to option 1 if you can. Let me pause and see what questions you have. Okay, so let me go over those important notes starting at the bottom of page 19. The first one is that these costs are salary dollars only, not benefits. The second one is that we recommend the manager have flexibility if somebody is in the disciplinary process and they're not currently earning their paycheck to delay any we actually don't call these increases, we call them catch-ups. because what you're doing is catching people up to where they should be already, but to delay that until a person's actually earning their paycheck. The third important note at the top of page 20 is that the data we have is right now. Effective July 1st, all these same people are going to do a COLA. So, you know, if you don't do one, you're going to end up behind again. Now, what I do see a lot of times, not a lot of times, sometimes when organizations do a classification pay implementation, sometimes instead of doing the COLA in July, they'll move it to January. Just to, you know, kind of help with that budget year, and that's something you might consider. Number 4, we recommend the manager have the authority to make minor adjustments if there are inequities. And what I mean by that is all we have are hire dates and promotion dates. You could very well have a police officer who shows to us they've been with the town for 2 years, but they were somewhere else for 8 years. And, you know, they should be further up in the range than somebody who's only had 2 years as a police officer. So the manager will need the authority to make those kinds of adjustments. And then finally, number 5, these salary adjustments are a one-time catch-up to place employees where they should be in the market. They don't replace COLAs or merit increases or longevity or certification or career ladder or any of the other kinds of things that you're doing. So page 21 is those actual bar charts you can see. And you can see that, you know, option 3 has a lot more compression than option 1. For example, at the 10% into the pay range, in option 1 you have 24 employees, and in option 3 you have 30 employees. So you're moving 6 people, you know, backwards in the range from option 1 to option 3. Page 22 is the actual salary table, and page 23 and 24 are the actual, that's what you adopt. That is the pay plan that you adopt. That shows each job in the grade based on market information.
And this, page 23 and 24 is what y'all would recommend based on everything you've been talking about.
But those numbers are off of 1, 2, or 3?
Yeah, all, regardless of those 3 options, this table works.
Okay.
The difference is
I
in,
got you.
you're putting the police officers in the same range, but you're
Yeah.
moving different places here with option 1, 2, and 3. Starting on page 26 is the actual salary data we collected. So you can look at that. It takes you down all the towns, what they are paying. It takes you to an average. And as I said earlier, we don't necessarily always look at just the average, especially for management and supervisory jobs. Your current and then the recommended are all there at the bottom.
I have a question for you, Lori. So how do you handle an employee that serves a dual role, like 2 positions?
So we see all kinds of dual, triple, quadruple roles. So if we go to, I just did a study for, well, we're doing the study right now for the town of Topsail Beach. You know, they have one person that is town clerk, HR, accounting, accounts payable, general ledger, you know. But, so we take into account the variety of work, but we also, that's one job. It's not multiple jobs, you know, they're still supposedly 40 hours a week. It's getting hard at times, but supposedly 40 hours a week. So what we do is we start with the part that they're doing that's highest in the market, and then we add some for the variety.
Sure. Thank you.
Sure. Other questions? Okay, if you're ready, we'll go behind the policy tab. And behind that tab, there's a couple of pages of management recommendations. And you can think of those, you know, some of them you might, the town might want to look at in the near term, some of them, you know, that you might look at 2 or 3 years down the road. And then the next 2 pages are benefits see how your benefits stack up. And we recommended last time and we're recommending again, life insurance is not expensive. Going to one-time salary for life insurance as opposed to 10,000. You'll see, there are different amounts in the market, but that is something we did recommend. And then the other probably biggest recommendation is adding starting to move up on that 401k. So law enforcement, the town's required to do 5%. A lot of local governments around the state wanted to equalize that out for all employees. And so you'll see that what the different places are doing, and there's a variety. But what we found is if the organizations can add 1% periodically to that and get up to that 5%, that's good. The next page has vacation longevity. We did not make any recommended changes in those. But you can see how we stack up on those. Then comes the personnel policy, and what we did was we took your current policy and we just highlighted changes. So for example, if you look at page 24, that whole page is some recommended additions to the policy. Some of it we updated, some things we already passed, like you already updated your longevity plan, but it wasn't in the policy. We went and added that change to the policy. Most of the changes you'll see in here are because of court cases, the General Assembly, and regulations. That's the vast majority of the changes you'll see in here. And then the final tab is the class specifications. And we haven't finished updating all of them. We will be doing that, but what we tried to do is put some of the larger changes, newer kinds of jobs in here, just so you could see some examples of what those look like. And most of the others don't have as much change, but we will be updating them as well. So I know you got another agenda, so I wanted to go as fast as I could, but also
Money well spent.
Well done.
Yeah, I mean, this is great.
Yeah, Ms. Vesey, I don't have to tell you, I speak for everyone up here because I hear everyone saying it. Thank you so much
Yes.
for your time and attention to detail on this. And I would like to say, we would like to keep it open, the possibility of you coming back if we do have specific questions or areas of concern. And then as I address council, my intent would be for us, we've got a lot to digest, a lot of detail in here. Let's all take a look at it, and we'll come back and discuss it some more in April. Keeping in mind, budget season is here, and we need to have a proposed budget normally by the end of May, right? So we've got some time, but also remember that that's our time frame. And so look at it individually, and we'll come back and discuss it in further detail in April. So thank you very much.
Thank
It's
you.
very informative.
And thank you for putting me first on the agenda.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. Our next agenda item is a renewal of an airport lease. North Carolina Department of Transportation rents a garage bay, which is to the right of the terminal building on the east side. The proposed lease is for 3 years, and it represents a 3% increase from the previous 3-year lease, and also has a 3-year escalation, a 3% escalation each year. This lease will run from May 2025 until February 2027. Like I said, it's not a new lease, it's just a renewal of a tenant's lease that's already there on location. Is that correct?
That's correct.
We do need action on this, and so to get it forward on discussion, I would entertain a motion and a second to approve the lease as written. Second. Okay, we've got a motion and second. Does anybody have any questions of me or Corey about that? Any discussion on it? Okay, there being none, all in favor of approving the lease as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Let's move forward with that, Corey, if you will. Next, you'll recall back in January, we got a report from Dwayne on our minimum housing ordinance, and we actually voted on the ordinance. As you recall, as kind of a general summary, that we decided to give our residents and property owners 90 days to take corrective action. This is a 75-day update, and it's intended to kind of give us a forecast of what town management, and particularly Dwayne Wilton, will be recommending in April once the 90 days are up. Does anybody need Dwayne to come forward and speak to us? He has given us a graph in our memorandum that gives us a forecast on each one of those addresses, what he believes his recommendation will be at the 90-day mark. This does not require any action, it's just for our information. Does anybody have any questions specifically?
Some of these are really historic houses, I just wanna make sure we're not gonna start bulldozing historic houses.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I mean,
I can,
that's,
I've taken that into consideration as well, so, you see beside, three of them, is a reconsideration, for demolition, be drafted into the minimum housing ordinance. This is simply because, let's say, 513 Coke Avenue hasn't had, there's no record of electricity, meaning it hasn't had electricity since 2007. And the taxes are unpaid since 2008, and it is in tax foreclosure. 724.MLK, there's no record of electricity being up there, so that means it's prior to 2007 that it had electricity. It's in tax foreclosure, and the taxes are unpaid since 2010. And then the 1318, it has no electricity since 2023, and taxes are unpaid since 22. I've taken into consideration the historical nature too. We're just seeing, don't see an out with some of these properties, so it was just a recommendation.
that we could actually ask them just to donate it, give them to the town.
Yeah, I've tried calling the owners again, and haven't received any response.
We'll just monitor that, I mean, we're not gonna,
Is that the biggest issue you have, is getting with the heirs and the owners?
Mhm.
so thank you for doing this.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get the town to a point where, providing, the knowledge of legal aid and stuff like that for, wills, and to get us to a point where hopefully we don't have air properties that is impossible.
There are more coming, is that correct? Is that on the table?
Tonight, yes, and
No.
I think so. There's.
Yeah, we've got some we're getting ready to talk about. And on this, I encourage council to, if you've got any individual concerns, whether they're historical in nature or personal concerns related to the property owner, just let Dwayne know before the April meeting, because that is when the 90 days expires.
Because I think some of these could be put back in service pretty easily.
Mhm.
Yep.
So just let him know, be prepared to talk about that at our April meeting. Thank you, Dwayne. You want to stay right there?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so next we have a new round of properties that we have to look at, and I would recommend that we handle it the same way we did in January. I recall commending all of you in the manner in which we handled all the addresses back in January. And what we did, we need individual action on each of those. And if any of you did have some knowledge about any of the houses back in January as to their historical value, or if there were personal circumstances of the owner, you let us all know about that, and then we voted on what to be done with each of these houses. Like I just mentioned, we did give each of the people in January 90 days to try to take care of their properties, and that might be something you want to consider this time around. But Dwayne, if you will just begin with 111 East Carteret Street, and just give us a quick summary of that, and then we'll conduct a vote on the ordinance.
Okay, yes, sir. So you have the proposed minimum housing ordinance in front of you. So 111 East Carteret, I'll kind of give some backstory on that one. It is a vacant property. I'm trying to remember the questions that were asked before and had all them answered. So there's been no electricity there since July 3rd of 2007. It is in tax foreclosure, and the taxes are unpaid since 2005.
So I'm having some trouble following, okay, maybe.
Yeah, I did.
Okay, so it's in the agenda packet.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. And are we going straight down from the top, which,
Page 17 is page
one. What's the address? We have to put out some pictures.
So the first three properties are the ones that we provided updates from
Okay.
January, and then starting on photo 4, that's where the next addresses will be. Pictures of those homes.
And these are, new pictures from, as early as Friday. Went out and took pictures, just to refresh people.
And so we're talking about 111 East Carter Ave, the brick.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay.
It's in really poor shape. We've gotten it to the point where, it's ready to be, voted on, and looked at. Like I said, it's been vacant, no electricity since 2007. It is in tax foreclosure and unpaid tax in 2005. The tax office refers to this, property as an impractical list, meaning there's probably, more heirs than anything. But I wouldn't say, I'm not sure about this, but one of these houses, they're in foreclosure, has, I think, 120 some heirs the last time I looked at it.
Councilman Bond, was that Vernon's old house? Vernon, is that the one you saw in the store on Oakland Street? Is that his old house? That's not his, the brick one?
I think
That's across the street, isn't it?
No, it's on the same
Yeah,
side.
it's on, okay.
That's not his?
that's it.
Yeah. So you haven't been able to get in contact with the heirs at all?
No, like I said, we've gone through the process already where, I mean, this is, I think now a year and a half in, trying to.
She's in a home.
Yeah, and most of the time, because there's so many heirs, there has to be so many heirs sign off on anything. That might be the reason why I've gotten
Her
this point.
daughter is living in, is it Jacksonville or Fayetteville, somewhere like that?
Dwayne, refresh our collective recollection. Back in January, I think we almost blanket, if not all the way blanket, gave 90 days on almost every house.
Yeah, and it depends on how you want to handle it. Like, we can revisit those, 9 ordinances again in, I guess, next month, and we can vote on it then. I have been, working with, the homeowners, 2 of the homeowners I've been working with, another one, I had, Carolina Rebuilding Ministries there, doing an inspection. There has been some work done on behalf of the owner, but they're waiting on donations to really help with the inside. There's some electrical issues on the inside.
I think
it's up to the council to determine that.
Just one thing to add, I think that it will get us on the path of the 90 days. So 2 things did occur, either the minimum housing ordinance because of some type of contact that council may have with a family member or known owner of the resident. It was either tabled for 90 days to be revisited, or if an ordinance was passed, the time period for the repairs to be made was extended from 30 days to 90 days. And so that's the 90-day threshold applied either to the ordinance that was approved or the tabling of that ordinance for an additional 90 days because someone was able to help us find a family member or contact one of the
And I
owners.
think that's great if we all know somebody in that thing, but Dwayne's worked on this more than 90 days.
Yeah,
so-
so I would
How long
ask,
do you
like,
keep
what
doing
would be the next step if we just decide that?
Voting on the ordinance, to determine, an extra 30, 90 days for repair, renovation, demolition, whatever.
So is there an option not to demo it and like reclaim and try to sell it, or, and if that doesn't work, we can
So-
result to demo?
So we're talking about 2 things. If we're talking about the list of new 5 properties that is presented here tonight,
Correct.
we can choose to do what we did in January, table for 90 days and revisit it then, or approve the housing ordinance and extend that timeline 90 days. So if we look back from the list that was shared from January, that was the previous agenda item, those minimum housing ordinances were already implemented. So when we say what's the next step, if they were tabled, we will revisit them in April and revisit that minimum housing ordinance and probably do that same thing, where we vote, make it 90 days and push it forward. If it was approved with a 90-day condition on day 91, what Dwayne will be able to do is start soliciting pricing on making the repairs, doing the demolition, if that was something that was the only option. pricing those out, and we would start moving forward with
So
taking
so
those
if we do,
steps.
if we do some of these houses are, we don't wanna demolish, we do we do stabilization work, then we can actually put a lien and then take the property.
Yes, yes.
And that seems, so I guess one step that I hadn't really thought about till tonight, I'm sorry to always be, hung up on this, but I wonder if we can get this, like, they found the oldest house in a house that nobody would have ever thought was the oldest house. And I think we ought to have the state historic preservation office or somebody look at these houses before we start tearing them down. And just to say, because the one on Granville Street, I think that thing's old. I mean, really old. And, and then Vernon Austin, I mean, he was really an important person in the black community here. And I think that, that's got some historic value. Some of these other ones, I don't know anything about, but somebody might look under it and see a 200-year-old beam, and it might be the oldest house in the state. So I just think we, especially where we sit, we need to be really careful not to bulldoze something that is historic. And historic means contributing to the National Register of Historic Places. You know that, and zone. So, I mean, some of these things are probably contributing in some way, and they're eligible for tax credit, so.
Well, as I recall, the ones that we tabled for 90 days, that's where you have a known owner that's somewhat cooperating with you or trying to make repairs or might need a referral to Carolina Ministry. So we tabled those, and the other ones, which seem to be less hopeful, we still gave them 90 days, but on day 91, you were going to take action. So do you want to go through each one of these and give us your recommendation? Are any of those, let me back up one, are any of these where you have known owners who are staying in contact with you and there's some hope, or are all of these kind of falling in the hopeless category?
They're the top three, let's see, 111 East Carteret, 204 East Peterson, 508 North Granville, and 1350 North Broad. They all have unpaid taxes. The first three taxes, they're in tax foreclosure. No electricity since 2008, 2007, 2007. It's become a public nuisance at this point because now we have people breaking in windows, going inside, hanging out. So it's more, the people I can work with, I'm working with. I have a 1797 hung that's on the National Register that I finally got him talking to a contractor this morning. I sat down with another lady, I spoke with her, the one that was tabled for 90 days. Finally got her in contact with a contractor we're working. These are so far gone, they're a public nuisance in the neighborhood.
All of the ones that you're presenting to us tonight?
All the
1, 5, 6, and 8.
1350 North Broad, that's, the owner's passed away, and I've had several people interested. We've sent them forward to the law office to make an offer, and it's been shot down every time.
But that wouldn't be one that you would think that, I'm just having a hard time following the way it's put together. I don't quite.
Yeah,
I mean, so.
Which one was that again?
Which one is that?
1350 North Broad.
And is there a picture of that one? Yeah, okay. Yeah.
What's,
How about we take your recommendation or hear the recommendation
Yeah.
that you have for each one, and then we can kind of go from there. I would say, but I don't want to tear them down if we could repurpose them or rehab them. I don't know if it's an option for us to reclaim it and sell it and do whatever, but I'd much rather try that before tearing it down.
Yeah, I mean, because I think that if we, like especially 111, and then, I know this is in the beginning, which I don't think was on the last list, but 508 North Granville. I mean, I was riding with somebody yesterday, they said, I'd love to buy that house and redo it. I mean, so I think that.
I think what I'm hearing is maybe we need more thought on this, and this is not right for a vote right now. That's what I'm feeling and hearing. Is that what you were whispering to me?
Getting it done. But I like in the meantime, somebody to get a report from somebody to look at these houses.
We're making progress. I don't have a problem with pushing this another 2 weeks because we're addressing the issues, we're making progress.
Patrick, you had some, I'm sorry.
No, it just sounds like they're, from both sides of the table, it sounds like there are a lot of questions, and we might be in a better position to vote in April, so we can sort these out, because they're all legitimate concerns that you
I
guys
guess we're gonna
raised.
find a plan, like what's the next, 'cause I agree, some of these are just like, it's just in disrepair, no one can do anything.
Nuisance.
Yeah,
Some of the
you're right.
complaints that are generated from this is, we're just trying to solve an issue that's.
Yeah, I mean,
that's
I'm
been an
not
ongoing
trying
issue.
to, but I mean, if you look around this table, some of us live in these houses that have been, didn't have any windows for 50 years and now worth, you know, several $100,000. I mean,
Problem
it's
is navigating the tax foreclosure process. I think
Dwayne.
that's-
You said 113 taxes hasn't been paid and
I'm sorry, which one? I don't.
1350?
Conard Street,
111,
111.
111 Carter Street, taxes, what I have from the tax office, tax unpaid since 2005.
I mean, how can we push that? I mean, that's always been a problem. How do we push that along? Is there some way we can?
well, that's why we're getting
Yeah,
involved,
yeah,
because
so-
I think they picked the low-hanging fruit. I mean, I think they picked the easy ones with not a whole bunch of errors, and, you know, they know where the people are, and they know who they are, right? Is that good?
Yes, and so the 5 that are presented tonight, separate from, and we're still moving forward from the list from January, that if ordinances were put in place for a 90-day window, we'll start assessing the cost to repair versus the pricing, potentially the demolition versus what is owed for sale. Like all 3 of those figures will come together, and you would see those in April. The 5 that we're talking here tonight, the 111 East Carteret, 204 East Peterson, 508 North Granville, 800 MLK Avenue, and 1350 North Broad. Those 5 now, when we talk about what are those next steps,
You wanna place that in the same?
place that in the same bucket where we now have a dedicated timeline when we start getting to day 91, where the next step in the process can happen. When we talk about tax, you get into a process where, let's say 111 East Carteret has the 120 heirs. At the death of one of those heirs, the way the process works in tax foreclosure, if a death happens and then their heirs become entitled to that portion of their ownership, it restarts the entire process back to the very beginning. So some of these have gotten into a vicious tax cycle that never ends. These 5 minimum housing ordinances are a way to bring the tax office to the table with the town and say, now what do we do? We're out of that cycle. And so that's why these were included. These 5, not only on our nuisance list, they're not only on potentially this minimum housing list that's being created, but they're also the longest running properties for that tax list.
I've got a question that may ease some concerns. So on the ones that are already in the system, not these that we're talking about now, but the ones that we're gonna get a 90-day report on in April, on day 91, I mean, are they, and this is y'all's concern, are they automatically moving towards demolition, or do we have one final review where you say,
No, you
We
removed
didn't take
demolition.
the demolition off the
Yes,
table.
demolition.
Should we go another 90 days after we hit?
No,
day
so
91?
the ordinance that was brought forward from January for 13-18, it's in effect. It is there. Demolition was
We
removed
removed demolition.
at day 91. Now we can start, separate from any tax issue, separate from any nuisance issue, can start the process to remedy that asset.
And that's
one
why-
way or another?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
You know, I mean, that's a big house.
Yeah,
That's a
so-
nice house.
But my question, and I think Dwayne said no to address you 2 gentlemen's concern, is somehow we're gonna come back to us before that ultimate remedy of destruction and demolition takes place?
You would vote on the ordinance now with or without demolition, that's what's included in the ordinance, and then it's voted on, and then that window starts as soon as it's voted on. After 90 days, that's when fines can start happening, different things like that.
So separate from tax and separate from nuisance fees being owed for whatever reason, this allows the town to have the ability on day 91 to start working towards intervening on forfeiture of that.
And so, and at that point, we can
Decide.
we can decide, which I'm fine with, and if we do work on it, we can put a lien on it, and that trumps the tax liens.
Yes.
So that means that we can, by doing something to it, putting some kind of lien on it, we can then sell the property.
Yes.
Which makes it clear to be redone. I think that's a
Yes.
great option.
With-
I mean,
with-
I'm all
with
for that.
With deed restrictions, with whatever is decided at that point, but unless we get this MHO on the property, the only precedence that's set is nuisance or tax.
So we're gonna postpone this for 90 days.
My recommendation and Dwayne's would be to at least approve the 5 that are presented here with a 90-day window like we did before and remove the demolition piece. Once we get to the point of it being repaired to some point to apply a lien, that's when the town and the county would come back together and sit down and decide who's
okay
asking.
with that.
I'm okay with that. Yeah, I'm good with that.
Can I,
But
can
I
I
don't
make
want
a
90 day
motion?
forever.
approve this for
I mean,
90
we
days?
never get through this.
Can I make a motion to, let's hold off until 90 days on these 5 houses? Then revisit it on the 91 day,
And just for
Handled
clarity,
just like we did in January.
just like we did in January?
so going back to
To
what
amend
Hacker
the ordinance to read as 90 days and remove the demolition
correct.
Yeah.
for these 5 properties.
Right.
Well, I'll second that.
We still need to go through
Each
all
one.
5 of these
You have to
houses,
take
just
action
like we
on
did last
each
time.
5, yes,
You have to do that individually.
yes.
Are y'all ready to do that now that we have the assurances that?
I believe so. But one last thing, so going back to like what Hack said, does it come back to this board on day 91 or around that time to?
That's what we're meeting in 2 weeks to go over the ones we did.
Yeah.
Right, so that's why I want to make
Days
sure
ago,
that
90 days.
we have a final say so on it.
Yeah.
It's more of a transparency kind of thing,
Yeah.
so what we've done up to.
Well, I think we got to do this to get the ball rolling.
We do.
That's-
Yes.
I'm all for that, yeah.
So I envision within a year's time, there will be a condensed list of ones who have went through that work had happened at that property. Values and totals as of December 31 of 2025 have been established. Now we would figure out what to do next. Those would be discussions that we would have with the county tax to negotiate whatever it is that's owed on their end versus what is owed on the towns. And we decide at that point to absorb those properties, deed restrictions, restricted covenants. We've had time now to establish any type of preservation needs because of historic value, but this is the starting point for the town to intervene.
And let me just say, clear my head one more time about this, because we go in and let's say on the Austin house, we do $20,000 worth of work. Okay, we put a lien on it, we sell it. Now, and it brings 80,000, which you might. So that extra 60 would then go into the clerk's office, into an escrow account for them to figure out who gets the 60. The town gets its 20 back, and then a new person can move in that house lien clear.
Yes.
And we get the taxes back too.
Yeah, they get the back taxes
Yeah,
back.
that would be applied to the property, and then the remaining funds, if there were any.
Go into an escrow.
Yeah, and for the heirs, yes, to Vivian. That's correct.
It might show up then.
To hopefully ease Councilman Bond's concerns, last time specifically, we picked some houses and we said, hey, we know somebody involved.
Yeah.
Let's table that for 90 days,
Well,
so we can
I-
still do that.
Yeah, I know these folks, and I try to get a call out to the daughter, Patsy, in the morning.
So we do
I
like
don't know
the,
what time y'all been turned loose tonight, so I see it in the morning.
so this is one you'd want to table for 90 days.
Yeah, all 5 of them. Let's do the whole thing and come back in 91 days.
I think we have to do it one by one, right?
Yes, and so just to be clear, no minimum housing ordinances, even with the 90-day window being drafted tonight.
Correct.
Well, that's what you definitely want for this house, 111 East Carteret, correct?
Right. I thought we were doing all 5 of them.
Yeah, you gotta do it one by
We
one.
are, but we, unfortunately, I know where you're going, we have to do,
You should do them one by one.
one by one.
Yeah, the action has
You
to
come
be.
up with the
You
same.
can't just vote on all 5 together.
Okay,
I
so,
know where our house at, Dwayne, if y'all want to tear one down.
I know exactly what you're talking about too.
Okay, it ain't on the list.
It's good, it's getting close.
Don't we have
Getting
like,
close.
I'm working on another one for, Councilman Miller right now, that I'm,
Well, you-
30 days out.
Is that your house or the shed?
Shed.
That's your shed, yeah. Thank you.
Okay,
This one is a
so
nuisance.
keep things moving as it relates to 111 East Carteret Street. Is it sounds like it's a consensus of the council to take demolition off the table in that minimum housing ordinance and to give 90 days as opposed to 30 days. Is that the general consensus?
9 days.
Correct.
Okay, as it relates to 111 East Carteret Street, do I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. All in favor of adopting a minimum housing code on 111 East Carteret Street that would extend the 30 days to 90 days and remove the demolition remedy, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? All right, next, as we move to 204 East Peterson Street, does anybody have any special knowledge about this? Or do we just want to treat everybody the same and remove the demolition at this time
Correct.
and give them 90 days?
I'm fine with that.
But we didn't, that's not what we did last time.
What's that?
We did not table everything for 90 days. We got stuff.
No, not table. We're entering an ordinance, but
Taking
delaying.
demolition.
Yeah, we're delaying any action for 90 days.
Last time, there were 9 total
Some of them are
properties.
30 days.
2 were tabled for 90 days to revisit. All of the remaining 7, demolition was removed. And of those 7, all of them, demolition was removed from that ordinance.
Yeah, some got 30, some got 90.
Yeah, I don't really care how long it gets, as long as we get, number one,
We might
the
have changed it
demolition off the
30 to 90.
table, but
But I know
I
some
think we
were
need
90
90
originally,
days.
30
We're
originally.
gonna need to get some people in to look at them.
All right, as long as we're moving forward though, not kicking a can down the road.
No, we're entering the
So-
ordinance.
so-
The motion is to enter the ordinance now.
This is more than we've ever done in my almost 30 years on this council.
I'm just making sure we're getting something done with this.
I agree.
Oh, no, we're entering an ordinance, so that is definitely action being taken and not kicking the can.
That's not right.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second as it relates to 204 East Peterson Street. All in favor of entering
We don't have
a
a
minimum,
a motion.
what's that?
We don't have one,
We
but
didn't have
motion second.
You had a motion.
Not the second one. None of the second.
Not for item E. We just completed the one for 111 East Carteret. Now on item E, we would need a motion and
So
second.
Bob, motion and I second it.
Okay, all in favor of entering the minimum housing ordinance that would give the owner 90 days and also remove the language regarding demolition, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Next, we move to 508 Granville Street, and I would assume that we want the same language for this, where we would give it 90 days. We gotta- All right, and it's gonna give them 90 days and remove the demolition language. All in favor of that minimum housing code, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? Okay.
Who was the motion and the second? for that?
Councilman Bond, goes through that motion.
Then Miller seconded.
The next property that we have is a property located at 800 Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue. And again, it would be the same motion for that. Got a second? Got a motion and second. All in favor of entering the minimum housing code as moved and seconded, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The next property that we move to is 1350 North Broad Street. I'll entertain a motion and second for the same treatment of that address as the others.
So moved.
Second.
And a motion and second, all in favor of giving that property owner 90 days and removing the demolition language, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, Dwayne, by my count, that addresses all the addresses that you brought to us tonight.
Thank you for doing this.
Thank you, I really appreciate
Still
it.
got a good job.
I know it's a lot of work.
So
Mayor-
Mayor, at our next meeting, we'll look at the houses we discussed prior.
Right, we got a 75-day report on those tonight.
The ones that
and-
are in the packet.
Right,
And I'm not saying all of this, but I think that, as a business decision, on most of these houses, if we demolished them, it would cost us so much, we'd never get our money back in in tax and, you know, demolition costs, whereas I think if we do a minimum amount of work and then put a lien on them, I think we might get way recoup our investment.
So what would be the funding source for that?
And so, on that, that's one of the things we would need to talk about. That's why we're trying to get some of this legwork established with some of the worst homes now as we approach budget season to determine which one are in redevelopment zones that we establish capital for every year, which ones are not. And so that would be a planning line item if it were outside of the redevelopment zone where a certain allotment of funds was set aside to make those repairs to then be able to move forward with that lien.
And so we have to do repairs to place the lien.
Based on what was provided, to the property owners, yes.
But any amount would be, you know,
Yes.
would be enough. I mean, you just force it.
Because right now, you're looking at 15 of them. If we get another group of 5 and.
They're gonna keep coming.
And from a budgetary
That's a big
standpoint,
dollar.
and to address your concern and what Sambo just said, any amount will do. It doesn't mean that we have to go there and rehab it and make it in a sellable position.
Yeah.
Because the private market is, I mean, just doing it every day. I mean, it's amazing. You ride around and look at these streets and people are.
You can put $2,000 into it and move it?
I would recommend that we start with some of the exterior repairs to preserve the home.
Some
Roof,
structural.
siding, structural improvements as needed to make that home solid, so it does not.
Protect it from, no, we do landscape.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I mean, I think you can cut down.
I'm talking about
Brush,
The brush, yeah.
And
Yeah.
Corey, I don't want to go too deep in the rabbit hole, but there are some loans out there, in the 2 or 3K loan that, you know, individuals can obtain. There are not a lot of lenders around this area, but in the Time Warner area, I've spoken to quite a few that are interested in projects like that here.
And so when a list of homes like that was established, that repairs have been made to be sold, that would be a great opportunity to work with property owners then. New property owners at that property to make some of those improvements and share that loan information. That's right.
Okay, moving on to the last agenda item, we have a committee meeting tonight, the Administrative Committee, chaired by Councilman Miller. Ms. Veazey earlier tonight presented recommended changes based on her company's expertise to our personnel policy. Those were highlighted in gray in the notebook she gave us and also highlighted in gray in our agenda packet. Any discussion regarding that?
You just gave my report, Mayor.
Okay, yeah, it's based on the law, case
I don't
law,
know
legislation.
if you wanted to go over the 8 recommendations, or just, if it's in your packet, it's already there.
This, Councilman Miller, so the 8 that were shared, Tammy and I have had some discussion with Ms. Becky on. In addition to these 8, there are 2 other things that are in question, but the initial draft is there. This would, if approved at the next full council meeting, would take effect July 1.
I was gonna ask
We're
that.
trying to get some of that out of the way as we start to
These
work
would
on.
be, these would be the 8 new changes.
Yes, yes, that we would see that, you know, would give us some time to start printing those out and getting them prepared for handing out to the board. But most of these were just simple, legal changes that
Mayor,
are updated.
we just want to forward that to.
That's correct, no action tonight, anticipated action at
That's
that
all we
date.
have tonight.
Thank you very much. Thank y'all for your patience. Thank you for your patience out, general public. There being no further business at this special committee meeting, I will declare our meeting adjourned. Yeah, you too.